All right, so welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining the Tech Summit, Reaching Your Full Potential Online, where we have experts sharing their success, their secret tips to help you be successful, uber successful online. Today, I'm honored to have Dr. Fida Poli from Pymetrics. I'll give you a little bit of a bio on her. It is quite heavy-ended, so I'll try and do whatever I can justice, but I'll let her to talk a little bit more about that. So Dr. Fida Poli is an award-winning Harvard and MIT trained neuroscientist turned AI startup CEO. She is a CEO of Pymetrics, a talent matching platform that uses behavioral science and artificial intelligence to help companies like Unilever, Accenture, and LinkedIn match external and internal talent with their ideal jobs predictively and fairly. This is pretty impressive, Frida, and why don't you talk a
Thanks.
bit more about about what you do and a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me. So again, you got my background perfectly. I used to be a cognitive neuroscientist. Now I'm a startup CEO. And really the journey from what I used to do to what I do now actually came through watching recruiting happen for 2 years. So I transitioned out of academia through an MBA program, and I basically watched MBA students go through recruiting because that's what they do for 2 years. And it was there that I really thought to myself, wow, this process hasn't changed at all since, I'd graduated from college, and that was, 10 years earlier. And I was, just really kind of blown away by the fact that we had studied all these ways to understand people better, to optimize matching between, people and whatever the other opportunity was using machine learning. And it really dawned upon me that the world of work could benefit tremendously from
Mhm.
a platform like Pymetrics, where essentially, we're a job matching platform. But unlike a LinkedIn or an Indeed, we don't match on your skills. We match on aptitude. So an aptitude is something that's much more inherent about you. And there's no right or wrong end of the spectrum. So, we look at things like memory, attention, planning, emotionality, altruism, all sorts of things that make us human. So it's a pretty broad and holistic picture of someone. And we don't say, oh, if you have to be this way or you have to be that way. It's really all about figuring out what makes you unique, and then recommending careers that where your aptitude fit would be best suited. Does that make sense? So
Right.
and we always say, hey, you should do whatever you want to do. We're not trying to stifle people from pursuing something that they're passionate about, even if for whatever reason they're not a fit. But this idea came to me from watching so many of my classmates really struggle, A, with knowing what they wanted to do, and B, the flip side was being really convinced that they wanted to do something, which the minute they then entered that field, they were unhappy. And so it was like, how can we prevent this lack of matching or lack of fit that happens, both from the individual side and the company side, and trying to solve that problem. So that's how the journey transpired.
Nice, amazing story. That's really
Thanks.
impressive. Like coming from the academic to totally to the Pymetrics. And I was looking at some of your of the videos and that are online, specifically the tools that you use, and they're pretty impressive. So I'll get into that question. So kind of the journey of the tools that you've started created, and how do you how's that brought you success in terms of like both obviously matching like help working with LinkedIn and sort of companies like that, but how do you foresee your use of artificial intelligence and kind of bringing that success towards especially in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the type of data that we gather on people is very different than a traditional way of understanding whether someone is a fit for a role. So, when someone thinks about a job fit, they think about, do I have the skills it takes to do this job, right? And yet that's a little bit backwards, because the research has shown over and over again that if you sort of have the underlying predisposition to be good at a job, you will pick up the skills easily. But the flip side is not true. You can not be a good fit even if you have the skills, and that will sort of make you not as happy at your job. So I think that what we try to emphasize is that, instead of just thinking about someone as a laundry list of skills and experiences on their resume, which are very backward looking and really tell you more about someone's pedigree or their background, let's think about someone's true potential and what are all the worlds of opportunity that can and will open up if we think about someone more holistically. And I think that data is, it's very complementary to the type of data that are found on LinkedIn or resume. It's not that those data are not important. It's just that they're only a part of the puzzle. And we try to expand and sort of bring a much more holistic view of someone into the foreground.
Right. No, that helps. So basically, you're using artificial intelligence. So how, when you were doing this, setting this up, like, what are some of the challenges that you had, like when you were like starting this, some of the
Yeah,
struggles, I guess, and I guess
definitely.
the
Yeah.
success that come up? Yeah.
Sure. So, as a neuroscientist, when you try to tell people in the field of HR that you have a new technology, they look at you and you're like, the brain? You're going to put somebody in an MRI scanner? Like, what? Like, and they just, the link was not obvious, right? And then we tried to explain, no, neuroscientists do other things than just put people in brain imaging machines. We look at, what makes people fundamentally who they are, because at the end of the day, like, we talk about the heart, but really at the end of the day, it's the brain, right? That's
Right.
determining our personality. As well as our cognition. And so some of the challenges were simply explaining to people what we did in a way that was comprehensible. It's taken me a long time to sort of tone down my science speak and, hopefully talk, normal person language about what we do, less jargony. And I think so that was a big part of it. The second thing is,
Right.
I'm sure you've seen this, artificial intelligence is not necessarily viewed neutrally. I think some people view it very positively. I think others view it very negatively, especially in the field of work. They think, oh my goodness, it's going to take my job away. It's going to make me irrelevant, and so on. And so we really try to explain to people that, that's not what we do. We're not, or they might be very concerned about bias, right? Which is a real concern. So we had a lot of challenges basically explaining to people what the system did, the fact that we take a lot of care in auditing our algorithms for bias and, all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So there were both sort of, I think, explainability challenges and sort of making what we did relevant, as well as making people feel comfortable that, our system, yes, they could see the benefit, but there was some trepidation in adopting it because it sometimes felt too new and
Mm-hmm.
scary. So those are just some of the many challenges we've had.
No, that makes
The
sense.
list is long, so.
No, that's true. Like something like this is always, always gonna be you're rocking the boat, I guess, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously now with the days of like where we are right now in the pandemic, we're locked down, we're home. Everything's kind of shifted online, and I think that trend is not going. I mean, like being online is going to be the future, and probably might be like it continues for a little longer. Now, how does that play into impact what you're doing? Because obviously, if would that be more of like that's something that would be something more adaptable to what you're doing, or is something that is you see more expanding on that?
Yeah, I think it's more of an expansion. I mean, I think that
Right.
we are, I think that what we've seen with the sort of the current pandemic is just a real move towards digital tools, right? Broadly speaking, whether it's, they're AI based or they're, it's video like what we're on now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see a lot of these technologies as being very complementary and being part of a technology stack that people can use to enhance their processes. So we're a big believer in that. There are lots of different, that at the end of the day, the best solution is probably one that combines a number of different things,
Right.
because it's a pretty, I think we undervalue sometimes like HR, and we think, oh, it's simple, you just have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out who to hire. Well, it's actually quite complicated, and it actually is a pretty difficult craft. And so from our perspective, the more data you have, the more tools you have, the better your decisions will be. So.
Makes sense. So I saw an interview, I think online, where somebody asked you, what do you see yourself? How do you see HR in 2025? I think so for the context of those who haven't watched it, maybe you can repeat that, but do you think that response would be different now that we are in today, or that'd be the same?
Yeah. I mean, I always say it's like hard to predict out more than, 12 months, honestly, but, we're in so I think it would be different. I think it will actually be different, but in a positive way. So, I mean, I think that some of the trends that we're seeing, not just in HR, but in general, around distributed work, around remote working, things like that were trends that were already happening, right? People were already hoping, expecting more flexibility, ability to work remotely. And, what COVID has done is really just accelerated all those trends. And, think about it. It's a giant social experiment in work, right? I mean, if could you imagine pre-COVID someone being like, tomorrow your entire workforce has to work from home? So it would have been like, they would have come up with a million excuses as to why that would be completely impossible and never work. And I mean, you could just imagine. And yet, somebody said pandemic and everyone was like, oh, I can figure out a way to do it, right? And so it really just shows, I think, just the flexibility and adaptability of human beings. And again, we're talking about the people who are lucky enough to be able to do this, right? But I think that the flip side is that type of remote working now, I think is here to stay, right? And I think that will influence many things about HR. I was actually listening to a great podcast by the CEO of a company called, it's like Automation or something like that. And they're basically like an entirely distributed workforce. And, he was basically talking about how when you first distribute a workforce, you kind of take an office and you make it remote. Okay. Just like when they first started having TV programs, they would take a radio program and make it a TV program, right? And then they actually then started creating programs for the medium. And that's sort of how he explains it, is that eventually work evolves to actually fit the remote work situation. Anyways, long story short, I think that will have some pretty, in my opinion, wide-ranging effects on a lot of different things, and all for the better, in my opinion. I mean, I think it allows for a lot more flexibility, for people who want to spend more time with their families, for people who don't want to commute for 3 hours a day, for people who are not fully abled and, maybe coming into an office is challenging. So I think there are a lot of different things that have happened with COVID, and remote work being one of them, that actually has a lot of really positive benefit, huge environmental benefit to people not flying everywhere. So definitely my answer would be different, but mostly in just how accelerated the pace will be, not so much in like fundamentally that things are going to be different, because a lot of these trends are already happening. So
right. No, that's true. That makes sense. So what is one tip that you can share today with anybody that will that they can implement today to have success? And I know that's an open-ended question, but
it's totally open-ended. Yeah. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, and I think it's important to take risk, and I think it's important to follow something that you're passionate about. Because I think if you're really passionate about something, you can put up with a lot more, because whatever you do in life is going to be hard. And at least if you're passionate about it, it's going to feel worth it. And I think that, there have been books written about this, like we shouldn't pursue happiness, we should pursue purpose. And I 100% agree with that. Like passion and purpose are really, I think at the end of the day, what makes people really thrive. And then I think you have to have some appetite for risk, meaning that I think, the status quo is not going to get you where you want to go. Especially if you have any kind of entrepreneurial, bone in your body. I mean, when I started my business, I was, in my late 30s, I was a single parent. I was the breadwinner for the family. Like, it was definitely not like a, cushy situation. But I really was very passionate about what I wanted to do. And I took the risk, and I think it was 100% worth it. So I definitely recommend it to people.
Nice. Good. That's very helpful. No, for sure. That's a great tip. So we're near the end. You mentioned something about how you'll be able to offer some of the listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, would love to offer your listeners the ability to use the PyMetrics platform, obviously completely for free. Come on and explore their potential, and see what roles, they might be, jobs, careers they might be good for that they may never have considered. And we also offer, reskilling opportunities and whatnot. So I think it'd be really interesting for anyone of your listeners that is really keen to explore new opportunities, especially now that, the world is kind of, turned upside down, and so many people are doing that anyways. Would love to be able to offer that to your audience, and be my pleasure to do so.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we'll keep a link below the video after when it's
Absolutely.
whoever's watching it, and they'll be able to access that from there. Perfect. Thank you again for taking your time is there anything else that you want to is there anything else you want to add to it?
No, I'm excited to have been able to share the story, and I think it's great that you're doing these types of events, and hopefully inspiring other people to pursue something that they find a lot of purpose in.
Perfect. Thank you so much again.
Yeah,
have a great day. Thank you.
Yep,
Take
you
care.